Well, welcome to this episode. Today I'm with my friend Dr. Trang Nguyen, who's a family medical physician in practice since 2003. And for 10 of these years, practicing has been helping patients with heroin and opioid addiction. And in addition to that, has also been helping patients with metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. So welcome to this podcast, Dr. Trong. I'm happy to see you here today.
Hey Mary, hi. Thanks for having me on today. I
Yeah,
am excited to be here. I am looking forward to our discussions today. And
me
so
too.
let's
Yeah.
get to it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you here. So I'd like to ask you first. Do you want to tell us just a little bit more, or in simple words, what is the actual role of because you've worked a lot with patients with metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. So do you want to tell me or tell us just a little bit more about what are those conditions and what happens in the body when someone suffers from metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance?
Certainly, certainly. You know, the thing, one of the things that we often forget is that our bodies is a set of a complex machinery, all right, with all these different parts move around so that we can function the way we function, right? It determines how we feel, how we're able to think, how we're able to process, recall memories, and how we are able to interact with each other on the physical and the emotional level. But all these different parts within our bodies require fuel, energy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, just like your car, when you don't put the right gas into your car or the right type of fuel, your car's not going to run. Or even if you only fill up the tank half a gas, half the tank, or if you run an electric vehicle and you only charge your battery 50% full, then you're not going to be able to get far to your destination. And that's also with our body. Insulin resistance is a problem of our body unable to bring in fuel, glucose, so that our brain, our body can function effectively. So
Mm.
that's what insulin resistance is in a nutshell. So when we talk about insulin resistance, or when we talk about uh, glucose or sugar metabolism, right? We often think about, okay, diabetes type 1, diabetes type 2, and all these technicalities in between. But the essence of it is this: when your brain are unable to bring in fuel, your ability to think, your ability to process data will be compromised, will be affected. And that's going to affect your emotion. And that's going to affect how you're able to interact and relate to other people.
That's so interesting. And I'm curious to know how often do you see that in your practice?
Almost all the time when someone has problem with insulin resistance, they feel depressed, they feel anxious, they feel irritable, all right? They have memory issues, they have sleeping problems, and so there are all these emotional, psychological problems. And of course, oftentimes they think, okay, I have problems with depression and anxiety. So let me see a psychiatrist, let me see a therapist to help me learn how to cope with all these emotions. But the problem to begin with was, how were their brains functioning to begin with? Because without fuel, their brains will not be able to function effectively. And as a result, they develop all these emotional issues.
Mm, that's so interesting. And what would be some other negative consequences of a elevated blood sugar level, other than
Okay.
the impact on the brain and regulation of emotions and things like that?
All right. I mean, we can talk about how insulin resistance affects different parts of the body, different organs, right? But we're not going to go into full details, but just briefly, right? It'll affect your immune systems. And as a result, people with problem of insulin resistance will develop more issues with allergy, whether it's allergy in the sinus, allergy in the skin in the form of eczema or various type of dermatitis, or allergy in the gut in the form of IBS or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, right? Or leaky gut syndrome. What about inflammation in the heart, leading to blockage of various blood vessels, leading to heart disease? What about inflammation in the liver, leading to conditions like hepatitis or fatty liver, which, if worsened, will develop a condition called cirrhosis, right? What about inflammation in the kidneys? Then people will develop kidney insufficiency when progress becomes kidney disease. And if it continues to get worse, they will end up being on dialysis. So there are all these inflammation and scarring in different parts of the body, resulting from our bodies not able to process fuel effectively.
Okay.
And again, it makes sense, right? It makes sense because if you think about it, how can your heart function effectively when it doesn't have enough fuel? How can your kidneys, how can your immune systems function effectively when they don't have the right fuel for them to run on? Just like your cars.
Totally. So is that a matter of like not having the right fuel, or is that more a matter of the fuel is there, but the cells can't bring it in, sort of thing?
Both. Okay, it goes with both. If you don't have the right type of nutrition, right, then that's going to lead to inflammation. Inflammation will lead to damage of the insulin receptors, which will result in insulin resistance. Right. So when you have insulin resistance, now you are at the next phase of the problem.
Okay.
Because with insulin resistance, now various parts of your body are unable to bring in fuel. And that will feed back to the process of inflammation and scarring to worsen the whole cycle.
Okay, so that becomes sort of like a vicious circle type of thing.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So basically, when there is elevated blood sugar level, that actually leads to more inflammation in the body. Is that it?
Absolutely. And more inflammation would then lead to more scarring and damages to the insulin receptors, which will result in more insulin resistance.
And basically, insulin resistance is like the step before like diabetes, as an example?
Yes.
Okay.
Diabetes is just a matter of diabetes is a diagnosis that we give when the damage has reached a certain level, right? For example, let's say I check your blood sugar and your blood sugar is above certain level, then you fit the diagnosis of diabetes. But let's say your blood sugar is higher than the normal level, but still lower than the diabetic level, then that's called pre-diabetes.
Okay.
Pre-diabetes simply means that your blood sugar is higher than normal, but it's not high enough to become diabetic. So that means you're already having insulin resistance, and it's just a matter of time before it gets worse. Or if you take the necessary step to intervene, then it'll become normal again, because now you have reversed the condition or cured the condition.
Okay. So I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about actually what we can do in to actually reverse insulin resistance. But before we do so, do you want just to tell us a little bit more about what would be some of the contributing factors leading to insulin resistance? Is that related to stress, to diet, to lack of exercise? Like what are some of the contributing factors there?
Awesome question. Now, can I share with you my screen so that there's a diagram that I want you and your audience to be able to see, to follow along? And once they see this and understand this diagram, everything about their health is going to make so much more sense.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
and we'll try to explain it the best we can for our audience that are on the podcast, actually. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, for your audience on YouTube, are you able to give me ability to share my screen?
Oh yeah, just hold on a second. Should be fine now.
That's right. There we go. All right. Looks like 2 omelet egg, doesn't it?
Totally.
Is
yeah.
Is that what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, all exactly.
Right. Awesome. All right. So this is the cell, all right? This could be the heart cell, the muscle cell, skin cell, etc. Our cells have what's called insulin receptors. Every time we eat anything with carbohydrate or sugar, that's known as glucose, that stimulates our body to produce insulin. Insulin will fit into the insulin receptor like a key inside a keyhole, like over here. And when the insulin, fits inside the insulin receptor, that will unlock what's known as the glucose channel or the carbohydrate door, open it up to allow sugar, glucose, carbohydrate from the outside to come inside the cell. Pretty simple, right? That's how the healthy body works. Healthy brain, healthy muscle, healthy heart. That's how it all works. So now, when you and I eat a meal like a cheeseburger that contains both fat and carbohydrate, insulin will do something very unique. Glucose still stimulates insulin to be produced in our body. But when insulin sees that there is both fat and glucose in the blood, insulin will bind the receptor in a different way to signal, to tell our body to slow down with all of its activities, ignore the glucose, and pay full attention to absorbing and storing up fat for future use.
Okay.
Because fat is so much more important for our survival in case there's famine or there is starvation.
Interesting.
So during that time, when the body slows down all of its activities and focuses on all the fat, glucose continue to float around in the blood, waiting for everything to be finished with fat first. After that, now the cell will open its glucose carbohydrate door again to work on bringing in and processing carbohydrate or glucose.
Okay.
Are you with me so far?
Yeah, yes, I am. So now I'm curious to know, is that at this moment where glucose will actually be sort of damaging the body while it's circulating?
Well, so that's how the normal body functions.
Okay.
Right? And that explains why after a fatty meal, we experience what's known as food coma. Right? We feel tired.
Yeah.
We don't want to do anything. Why?
Yeah.
Because insulin has told the body to slow down all of its activity to focus on absorbing, processing fat.
Okay.
And so we feel sleepy, we feel tired because our whole body has slowed down on its activity.
Mm.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah,
All
totally.
right. So now to answer your next question, when does insulin resistance happen? When does the damage begin to occur? Over time, when our body has absorbed of way too much fat, our body will begin to accumulate fat in different parts of the body that's not originally designed to store up fat, like our muscle, our skin, our heart, our liver. Those are not areas in our body that are designed to store up long-term fat. But because we have accumulated way too much fat over a period of time, we become overweight, we become obese. Now the fat starts to get spilled over into various parts of the bodies.
Okay.
When that happens, the cells becomes inflamed. All right.
Mhm.
So inflammation is like when somebody smack you, right? Your skin becomes swollen. It becomes red and it hurts. That's inflammation. And same thing, when too much fat is being stored in a regular cell, that cell will experience inflammation. Inflammation will lead to damages of the insulin receptors.
Okay.
So to answer your question, when does insulin resistance occur? It occurs when there's excessive fat being stored up in various parts of our body.
Okay.
Okay.
And then to like going back to your example you previously gave regarding like a meal such as a cheeseburger with fries. So I understand this is carbohydrates and fat and proteins. So is that different if those fats were not combined with carbohydrates, the way your body will process that meal?
What do you mean? Can you rephrase your question?
So, like as an example, in that meal, is that the combination of carbohydrates with like a lot of fat that will create the problem, or is that just the fact that there is too much fat in that meal?
Every time insulin sees that there's both fat and carbohydrate, insulin will signal the body to focus on the fat first.
Okay.
Once that's done, then our body will focus on processing the carbohydrate.
Okay. So, as an example, someone who would be eating a meal that is rich in fat, but there is no carbohydrates, they won't process it the same way.
Good question, right? Because the question that you just asked essentially talking about keto diet, right? Keto
Exactly.
diet is a type of diet where you eat minimal amount of carbohydrate, the rest is just fat. So from your body standpoint, there's no carb, all there is fat and protein. So when there's no glucose, when there's no carbohydrate, then there's nothing there to signal your body to produce insulin. Without insulin binding to the receptor, your body is not being signaled. There's nothing to signal your body to focus on absorbing fat. And so now you are in a situation where your body is not absorbing and storing up fat because there's no insulin to begin with. And the reason why there's no insulin is because there was no carbohydrate to signal insulin production.
Okay.
Are you with me on that point?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. And that explains why and how people lose weight by eating meat and fat alone, right? Because without carbohydrate, without glucose, there's no insulin production. Without insulin, there's no signal to the body to store up fat.
Mm-hmm.
And that also explains why people with type 1 diabetes, that's the type of diabetes where the patient, the individual, is unable to produce insulin. All right, so they cannot produce insulin. So when they don't produce insulin, when they cannot produce insulin, they also cannot store up fat. And so type 1 diabetic individuals are thin and skinny because they cannot store up fat.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm curious to know, is that the type of diet that you do propose to your patients, the keto diet?
Okay. Now, so now your next question is, okay, so you have people with insulin resistance, you have people with diabetes, and as a result, they're suffering with high blood sugar, which leads to a slew of medical problems, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The challenge for them is this. So now the question is, what are their options to, one, fix their blood sugar level?
Yeah.
And also, the second question is, what are their options to fix their insulin resistance? For people who adopt a diet to help bring down the blood sugar, that will allow them to function better mentally and emotionally, right? Because now their brains have the fuel that they need.
Mm-hmm.
That will
Exactly.
also help their lungs, their heart, the kidneys, the liver to function more effectively, right? But the question that I often present to my patients is this: what are their long-term goals? Is it that they only want to fix their blood sugar level, or they want to fix their blood sugar level plus they want to fix their insulin receptors? All right. For people who love meat and they cannot live without meat, but they also want to fix the blood sugar problem, then the option for them is the keto diet or other variations of it, focusing on meat and fat and limiting carbohydrate, because that's going to allow them to limit the carbohydrate in their blood, improve their lab values, improve their lab numbers, right? Allow them to lose weight. But at that moment, at the same time, they're not doing anything to help fix their insulin receptors. Why? Because as long as there's fat in their system, the body is not going to focus on repairing the inflammation here.
Okay.
Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
For the second group of people who wants to improve their blood sugar level and also want to fix their insulin receptors, now the option for them is a plant-based, a high-carb, high-fiber food system with low or zero fat. It's a complete opposite of the keto diet. All right, so the keto diet focus on high fat, high protein, low carb. The high fiber diet focus on high fiber, high carbs, and low fat. Why does that work? It works because this: when they eat a lot of whole carbs, that carb will signal the insulin to be produced, right? So when the insulin binds to the receptors and the insulin does not see any fat, then the insulin will allow sugar to come in. And because there's no fat, all the fat that has been stored up will eventually get cleared out. And at the same time, when these individuals eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, they are consuming special type of plant proteins that will eventually allow their insulin receptors to be fixed.
From the phytonutrients that are contained in the fruit and vegetables.
From the phytoproteins, plus from the clearing out, elimination of the excess fat that's being built up throughout the body.
Okay.
Those two factors.
Mm.
There are advantages and disadvantages to both systems, right? For somebody who eats a keto diet, one day, let's say they have a piece of toast, all right? And they eat that piece of toast. What's going to happen? Their blood sugar is going to go through the roof. Why? Because their insulin receptors have not been able to do anything, have not been repaired or fixed to deal with that presence of carbohydrate. Plant-based low fat, with their insulin receptor fixed. Let's say they have a piece of steak and there's fat now in their blood. What's going to happen? Nothing, because their body now still able to process carbohydrate and fat because their insulin receptors have been fixed.
Okay, so basically, from my understanding, you're more prone to propose the second option, which is a plant-based, high carbohydrates, low fat diet.
I am by nature the type of guy, the type of physician who has always been interested in treating the root of the problem rather than just the symptom.
Yeah.
And as a result, I will present it to my patients the two ways, but with the emphasis on fixing the root of the problem long term. Why? Because I want patients to have more flexibility in their meals, in their meat, right? Because with their insulin receptors being fixed, now they can go out with their friends. They can get together with their family and eat anything, and their bodies will be able to process everything.
Yeah, okay.
But let's say they adopt the keto diet and ignore fixing the insulin receptors, and they hang out with their friends, or they go to a wedding where there's a lot of carbohydrate. What are they going to do? They can't just focus on the meat and the protein because there's just not enough of it for everybody at the dinner, at the table, right? Especially if you ever come to an Asian wedding, all right? You will have meat, you will have carb, and you will have every variety of food on the table, and you'll be sitting around the table with 10 other guests. If all I'm doing is focusing and eating up all the meat, the guests will be very upset with me. Right? Because they're going to ask, where's their lobsters? Where's their steak? Where's their Peking duck, etc.? So I can't do that. But at the same time, I cannot eat the fried rice, the noodle, the pasta, etc. Why? Because that's going to cause my blood sugar to go through the roof. So what am I supposed to do, right? Pack my own food to a wedding or eat first before I go? Yeah, you can do all of that. But where's the fun in that? The second reason why, so besides the flexibility, the second reason why I like the high fiber, low fat system is because it's much, much more affordable.
Okay.
It's much more affordable financially for the vast majority of my patients. Keto and Atkins diets are the most expensive form of dietary system.
And that's really sustainable, I guess, because people need to eat a lot of protein coming from like meat.
Animal.
Yeah, animal.
Exactly. And that's bring back to the third reason. High fiber, low fat is much more environmentally responsible.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So much of our forests are being burned down, being razed, so that we can raise cattle, so that we can keep meat at the market, at the fast food restaurant cost down. That's just not responsible. And so those are the main three reasons, right? One, flexibility with what they can eat. Number two, Uh, the, it's more affordable to their budget. And number three, it's much more environmentally responsible.
Mm,
And that's the
yeah.
reason why. But
Okay.
again, I don't push them away from the keto diet because I would rather, if they can afford it, great, go for it, because it's important for them to bring down their numbers to help reverse the inflammation uh, as a result of their high blood sugar as quickly as possible, hoping that sometime down the road they will be able to switch over so that they can fix the root cause of their insulin resistance.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you bring two solutions there. It's not like only one size fits all. There's like two options for people. So
Yeah,
I think this is also helping people to actually choose an option that will work for them as well. And in terms of
absolutely.
like the high fiber, high plant-based diet, does it has to be like 100% vegan diet in order to make it work? Or does people can actually include a little bit of yogurt or something like that?
So remember, with the plant-based low-fat system, meat is not the enemy.
Mm,
Meat is not the reason why insulin resistance develop, right? This is the reason why.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you can find meat with less than 10% fat content, have
That's
fun.
okay. Okay.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that type of meat is going to be much more expensive
Yeah.
than regular meat, right? You're not going to be able to find meat consistently, affordably with less than 10% fat. And that's the reason why with the plant-based high fiber, low fat system, there's a certain group of food that they are to avoid. And all of these foods will contain fat or processed. All right. So of course, everyone agrees that processed food is bad for you, right? Coca-Cola, uh, bacon, canned food, all these processed food is bad for you. So we don't have to talk about that. So let's talk about meat, or let's talk about dairy products, seafood, cooking oil. What do they all have in common? All right. And the answer is fat.
Mm,
And that's why a lot of patients, when they see that, okay, salmon is a food item that for them to avoid, they would say, salmon? I thought salmon, so it's healthy. Yes, it is healthy, but not when you're already having insulin resistance.
okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Cooking oil, which include corn oil, vegetable oil, olive oil. Olive oil? I thought that's healthy oil. Yes, it is, but not when you have insulin resistance because your body sees oil is oil. Makes no difference where it comes from. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why food containing high fat content, cooking oil, seafood, every kind of meat, right, is to be minimized because we want to minimize the accumulation of fat.
Okay. Okay. So basically, when you say minimize, is there like a specific amount of fat that the person is allowed to eat? And if the person goes over that, then it sort of destroys everything they've been doing.
Well, yes, you can quantify it for people who love to measure,
Mm-hmm.
right? But for people who don't like to calorie count or who don't like to count the amount of fat that they eat, then they can just start cutting out as much as they aware of and then monitor their weight.
Okay.
Each week, if they are not losing 2 or 3 pounds, then that means what? That means they are still consuming too much fat. So
Okay.
now they need to go back and start asking themselves, how much cooking oil am I adding to my recipe, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much salad dressing am I adding to my salads, right? How much meat am I still eating that I'm fooling myself? Or what about plant-based meat that I'm buying at the store? How
Mm.
much of those am I eating? Remember, those items contain a ton of fat.
Okay. Interesting.
Plant-based meat
Yeah.
is bad for you when you have insulin resistance. Why?
Okay.
Because they contain a ton of fat.
Okay. So that wouldn't be
That's
a
why they're high
healthier
flavored.
choice. Yeah, okay. That's interesting.
Okay.
And now, like, if a person is looking at working on their blood sugar level or their insulin resistance, like, how long is it taking them to achieve, like, I guess, balanced blood sugar level? Is that 2 weeks, 3 months, 1 year? What do you see generally?
You will be surprised when I tell you this. When we did this over a 4-day weekend retreat before the pandemic, of course, right?
Yeah.
By day 4, we would have to start decreasing half of the participants' medications. By day number 4,
By day number 4?
we already had to decrease half of their medications.
Okay. So only in 4 days, you could already see a significant improvement on their blood sugar level. That's amazing.
And these were individuals who were consuming huge amount of whole rice, brown rice, black rice, wild rice, all kind of fruits, all kind of high carb vegetables. And yet, by day 4, we were already decreasing the medications.
Wow.
Mind blowing. How could they get so much better when they were eating so much more carbs? Whole carbs, right? We're not talking about processed carbs, whole carbs.
Yeah.
Because of how our body functions. Without fat, insulin will focus on absorbing glucose, removing sugar out of the blood, help cleaning up the cells to improve insulin resistance.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point there as well. It's important for people to remember that it's not any carbs. It has to be like all grains, as like brown rice or like whole wheat bread or something like that, right?
Exactly. Why? Right. Exactly. Why? Because remember, it's the presence of the fiber that is healthy, right? Similar with brown rice. What makes brown rice so much healthier than white rice? Both are rice, right?
Yeah.
And the difference is that brown rice retains its covering around the shell, right? The brown bran. That's the fiber structure protecting the rice particle. White rice, you go through the processing process to remove the bran, remove the fiber covering. So now you have just pure carbohydrate particle. It looks more beautiful. It has a nicer fragrance, but you have removed all the nutritious component, which is the bran, the fiber.
And I guess you've removed, exactly, the fiber, and the role of the fiber is to actually slow down the absorption of sugar in the bloodstream as well, right?
Exactly. The fiber helps slow down the sugar absorption.
Yeah.
The fiber helps nurture and nourish your gut bacteria.
Yeah.
With healthy gut bacteria that helps you process and absorb more nutrients, that helps strengthen your immune system, all right? Helps protect your gut from inflammation to prevent colon cancer, IBS, ulcerative colitis, etc. So there are all these benefits going into eating more fiber.
That's great. It's so interesting. And now I'm curious to know, other than dietary changes such as the one you've just mentioned, is there other thing that can actually improve insulin resistance, such as exercise or maybe stress management strategies? Is that something that has an impact on your blood sugar level?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exercise has been shown over and over again that through the process of exercising, your insulin receptors regain its sensitivity. Right? Just by exercising. We don't know exactly how that's happening yet. Right? Research is still being done to try to figure out all the fine details on why that's happening. But what we know is that insulin sensitivity increase, or insulin resistance decreases when you are exercising.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, that's so amazing.
Unfortunately, the effect is not permanent, right? You have to continue to exercise regularly in order to continue to have that benefit. You and I
Yeah.
can't just exercise one time and say,
Yeah,
voila,
and this
I
is
fixed my
it.
insulin resistance, right?
Yeah,
So yes,
consistency is the
exercise
key. Yeah,
consistency. Well, consistency once a month, that's pretty consistent.
it is. It
Doesn't hurt
has
either,
to
right?
happen more often than that, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. Consistency and frequency is what it's gonna be helping. And right. And so that's exercise. Stress management, right? The more stress we are, the more inflammation our body experience, right? When we're under more stress, you know this. When we're under
Mm,
more stress, our bodies produce more toxins. More toxins lead to more inflammation. More inflammation leads to more scarring and more damages to the insulin receptors. And
mm-hmm.
so, yes, stress management will help reduce toxin, reduce inflammation, but that's only going to prevent insulin receptors from becoming more damaged. What about the damage that's already there, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You and I can do all the meditation we want. We'll feel better, but that in itself is not going to reverse the scar that's already there, right? That by itself is not going to help deal with the inflammation resulting from the accumulation of fat. So,
Mm,
yes, we feel better. When we feel better, we will be more likely to make the right changes in our food. All right. When we feel better, we will be more likely to put on our tennis shoes and start running or start working out.
oh, yeah.
So yes, it's all work with each other. But the easiest thing to do, the easiest thing to do is to change our food, right? Because we're already eating. We're already eating. So why not change what we eat?
Yeah.
You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to break a sweat. You don't have to starve yourself. You don't have to go on a diet to cut back on calories. All you need to do is to change the type of food that you eat. Then your brain will work better, your bodies will work better. And then after that, you can do other things. Because once you start feeling better, once you start sleeping better, you can exercise more to give you more results. Right?
Mm,
You can meditate more, take more yoga lessons so that you can interact with your environment more effectively.
yeah.
Let's do the most basic thing, which is our food.
Yeah, that's such a great way to see it. So, for people listening, like, what would be one or the one, like the first actionable step they can take, like today or tomorrow, if they want to start to walk this journey on like improving their blood sugar level or their insulin resistance?
Limit your fat intake today.
Okay.
And you can do that by one, reduce the amount of meat that you're eating.
Mm,
All right. Reduce the amount of cooking oil that you're using in your cooking.
okay.
Let's start there. All right. And
Mm,
we all can do that, right? We don't have to spend more money. In fact, eat less meat. We're actually saving money here.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Because we
And
don't have to go to grocery shopping as frequently as before.
that's so true. And there's so many research that have shown that like eating a lot of meat isn't ideal for us humans, right? So,
Absolutely not.
yeah.
Of course, when you understand insulin, fat, and carbohydrate, how the three interact with each other, now you understand why eating large amount of meat or fat, right, is bad for you because it leads to inflammation. Inflammation leads to more scarring, leads to more risk with cancers and polyps in the gut, right? But not just
Mm-hmm.
that, also other parts of the body. It's all because of how insulin interact with fat. So it's not so much because of the protein, the meat protein, that is danger, right? It's the amount of fat content that we're consuming.
Okay. Yeah, great. And if people want to learn more about the work you do, perhaps they want to reach out to get some like help in improving insulin resistance, where they can find you or where they can follow you.
Excellent. Okay, I have a group, a private group on Facebook that your audience can request to join, right? It's called the Insulin Resistance Solutions.
Okay.
All right, and it has my face in the logo, so they
Okay.
will be able to know which group it is that we are referring to. It's the Insulin Resistance Solutions,
Okay.
and they can send a request to join the group, and I will add them in. That way, we can continue to talk about this.
Okay, this is great. And I'll put the link in the bio just underneath this video as well, so they can reach out to you more easily.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Nguyen. It was an amazing discussion. So interesting to learn more about the way this beautiful human machine works, right? And to really get more knowledge on what we can do in terms of dietary changes to help balance our blood sugar level. We definitely understand better now how this is important for our overall health, that's for sure. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Have an amazing day. Take care.
Thank you, Maureen. Bye-bye.